A gunshot in a quiet neighborhood becomes the spark that ignites a reckoning. When two racist officers gun down an elderly black man on his own porch, they think it's just another case file to be buried. What they don't know, the victim's son isn't just any soldier, he's Delta Force Commander Marcus Wilson. And in the next 24 hours, everything these officers built starts to crumble beneath the weight of military precision and unwavering justice. This is a story of systemic corruption, unaccountable violence, and the kind of justice that doesn't whisper. It strikes with surgical precision. Stick around. The twist? You won't believe it until you see it. Let us know where you're watching from and what time you found this. We read every single comment. Pine Creek, Missouri had always felt like a town trapped between two centuries. Modern storefronts and fiber optic cables alongside Civil War monuments and whispered codes that determined who belonged where. The sun had barely risen above the Edam tree line when Commander Marcus Wilson's phone lit up with a call that would change everything. At 38, Marcus carried himself with the contained power of someone who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer and lived to tell no tales about it. His dark eyes revealed nothing, not even to those closest to him. His close-cropped hair showed subtle flecks of gray earned in classified operations across 3 continents. Special Forces operators weren't supposed to break, and Marcus never had. People thought Delta Force was just a myth, something from action movies. This sleepy Missouri town had no idea what was headed their way. Marcus had grown up watching his father, Howard Wilson, navigate Pine Creek's racial fault lines with quiet dignity. Howard had served 27 years as the town's only black mail carrier, memorizing every name, every birthday, every little detail that made people feel seen. Even after retirement, Howard continued walking 4 miles each morning, waving to neighbors who either returned the gesture or deliberately looked away. Marcus had escaped Pine Creek's gravity. First West Point, then Rangers, finally Delta. He'd seen 15 years of combat, collected scars he wouldn't discuss, and earned commendations locked in classified files. Now, a colonel within the Joint Special Operations Command, he operated in shadows so deep most military personnel didn't know his unit existed. Marcus knew the cost of violence. They didn't just try to break you, they broke everything you touched. Captain Blake Reynolds had been watching Howard Wilson for months. The 52-year-old police captain considered himself Pine Creek's guardian against change. Third-generation law enforcement, Reynolds carried his badge like a birthright, rather than a responsibility. The complaints against him, excessive force, racial profiling, evidence tampering, always disappeared, scrubbed clean by a system built to protect its own. Marcus stepped off the military transport plane, already in civilian clothes, his mind calculating what most would call revenge, but what he knew was simply justice. His father was dead, and someone would answer for it. "I need to see the police captain," Marcus stated at the front desk of Pine Creek Police Department. His voice was measured, controlled, the voice of someone who never needed to yell to command. "Attention." "Captain's busy," the desk sergeant barked without looking up. "Leave your contact info." Marcus didn't move. "I'm here about Howard Wilson." The sergeant finally looked up, confusion briefly crossing his face as he sized up the stranger. Tall, muscular, but standing too still, like a statue breathing. Not a local troublemaker or typical complainant. "You family?" he asked skeptically. "I'm his son." "Well, son," the sergeant said with a smirk spreading across his face, "your daddy had a heart attack resisting arrest. Happens to folks who don't comply." Marcus didn't blink. "And where's his body?" "County morgue. Paperwork's being processed. Nothing to discuss until the ME's report." The squad room fell silent as Captain Reynolds emerged from his office. Something I can help you with? Reynolds asked, walking slowly toward Marcus, hand casually resting near his holster. Marcus turned, his eyes locking onto the captain's badge. The fluorescent lights above made the metal shine with unearned authority. My father died in your custody yesterday, Marcus said, his voice calm but carrying to every corner of the now silent room. Howard Wilson, 72 years old. No criminal record. No health issues. Reynolds nodded slightly, assessing the EB-bow man before him. Unfortunate situation. The old man got agitated when Officers Miller and Deacon approached him. Started making threatening movements. Things escalated. Marcus didn't move a muscle. Threatening movements? He reached for something. Officers had to make a split-second decision. And what did they find on him? Reynolds shifted his weight. Nothing, as it turned out. But in that moment... A wallet, Marcus interrupted. He was reaching for his ID, like they asked him to. Someone in the back of the room whispered, Jesus, not another one. Another, voice muttered. Who is this guy? Marcus's eyes never left Reynolds. I'd like to see the body camera footage. Equipment malfunction, Reynolds said too quickly. Both officers. Happens sometimes. Of course it does, Marcus replied. The silence tightened like a noose. The desk sergeant shifted uncomfortably. Sir, this man says he's Wilson's son. Reynolds blinked twice. Howard never mentioned a son in law enforcement. Not law enforcement, Marcus corrected. Military. Well, soldier, Reynolds said with forced casualness, I understand you're upset, but there are procedures. It's Commander, Marcus said quietly. And I'm not here about procedures. I'm here about justice. Reynolds laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no humor. Look, Commander, this isn't Baghdad. You don't get to waltz in here making demands. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as Marcus stood perfectly still. You have 24 hours, Marcus said. 24 hours for what? Reynolds challenged, puffing out his chest. To tell the truth, Marcus replied. After that, I find it myself. An officer near the back door straightened suddenly. Wait a minute. Wilson? Are you Marcus Wilson? From Pine Creek? Reynolds frowned. Who? The young officer's face paled. Holy shit! It's him! The Delta guy! Reynolds looked confused. Delta what? Delta Force, the officer whispered, and even Reynolds couldn't hide the flicker of recognition and fear that crossed his face. Marcus turned to leave, but paused at the door. 24 hours, Captain. Then we do this my way. One moment can change everything. What would you do if the system turned against your family? Without warning? Share your reaction below. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. You threatening a police officer? Reynolds called after Marcus, voice rising, with newfound anxiety. Marcus turned back slowly. I'm promising accountability. You military types think you're above the law, Reynolds said, motioning to an officer who had already pulled out his phone. We've got procedures here. Chain of command. I respect chains of command, Marcus replied, when they aren't broken. Your father resisted, Reynolds insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. Officers Miller and Deacon followed protocol. If you've got complaints, file them properly. I've read 17 complaints against your department in the past. 3 years, Marcus said. All dismissed, all involving black citizens. That's not protocol, that's pattern. Reynolds stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're making this into something it's not. I'm not making it anything, Marcus countered. Your officers shot an unarmed 72-year-old man on his own property. My father was a mail carrier for 27 years. Everyone in this town knew him. He matched a description, Reynolds attempted. Of what? Being black in his own yard? Marcus asked, his control never wavering. Reynolds glanced around at his officers. Several averted their eyes. Would you have shot a 72-year-old white man checking his mail? Marcus pressed. Reynolds said nothing, his jaw clenching. I'll take that as a no, Marcus continued. Now you've compounded that murder with a cover-up. You can't prove anything, Reynolds snapped, composure finally breaking. I don't need to, Marcus said. The town security camera across the street already did. Reynolds froze. What camera? The one my father convinced the city council to install last year after Mrs. Patterson's mailbox kept getting vandalized, Marcus replied. The one pointed directly at my father's front yard. Reynolds's face drained of color. 24 hours, Marcus repeated. Justice or consequences? If someone took everything from you, would you seek justice through the system or outside it? Drop your answer in the comments. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. Marcus walked out of the station, phone already to his ear, his voice crisp. Colonel Stevens, I need access to satellite imagery from yesterday, 1400 to 1600 hours. Pine Creek, Missouri, 738 Oakwood Drive. Reynolds watched through the station window, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. This wasn't going to disappear like the other incidents. No internal review to be filed away, no administrative leave until everything blew over. The air around him shifted rapidly. Captain, a young officer approached cautiously. I pulled Wilson's military record. What's not classified anyway? You should see this. Reynolds snatched the printout, eyes skimming the heavily redacted document. Combat deployments across 3 continents. Presidential unit citations. Individual commendations with details blacked out. What remained visible was enough to make his hands shake. Get Miller and Deacon in here, now, he ordered, voice tight. They're off duty until tomorrow, the desk sergeant replied nervously. I don't care if they're in the fucking Bahamas. Find them, Reynolds snapped. He glanced back at the window, but Marcus was already gone. Outside, Marcus stopped by a coffee shop across from the station. The barista recognized him immediately. Marcus Wilson, Howard's boy. Oh my God, I'm so sorry about your father, she said, eyes welling with tears. Everyone loved him. We're all devastated. Marcus nodded slightly. Tell me what you've heard, Jenny. People are saying it was Reynolds' new guys, Miller and Deacon. They've been trouble since they transferred here 6 months ago. Always hassling people of color, she lowered her voice. There's talk they were fired from their last department for excessive force, but Reynolds hired them anyway. Called them proactive officers. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something cold settled behind his eyes. Thank you. When the tide starts turning, do you stand firmer or back down? What would you do if the system was stacked against your family? Let us know. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. Back at his father's house, surrounded by sympathy cards and casseroles from neighbors, Marcus made his announcement to a small gathering of community members who'd known Howard for decades. Under the Freedom of Information Act and with authority granted by my military security clearance, I have requested and received access to all electronic communications between the Pine Creek Police Department officers involved in my father's death, he stated calmly to the stunned group. Pastor James, who'd known Howard for 40 years, gasped audibly. Can you really do that? I already have, Marcus replied. The communications reveal a pattern of targeted harassment against specific citizens, including my father. Mrs. Larson, Howard's neighbor for 30 years, clutched her handkerchief. Your father was the gentlest soul in this town. I've initiated contact with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, Marcus continued. They'll be arriving tomorrow morning to begin a formal investigation into patterns and practices of the Pine Creek Police Department. Across town, Officer Miller pounded on Deacon's apartment door. Open up, man! We've got trouble! Deacon yanked the door open, beer in hand. What's your problem? Wilson's kid, Miller hissed, pushing inside. He's some kind of special forces operator. Reynolds is losing his mind. So what? Deacon scoffed. Military's got no jurisdiction here. You don't get it, Miller said, pacing nervously. This guy's got connections, federal connections, and he knows about the texts. Deacon froze. What texts? All of them. The ones about targeting Wilson's neighborhood. The ones joking about cleaning up Pine Creek. Everything. That's not possible, Deacon whispered, fear forgotten. Those were private. Nothing's private anymore, Miller replied. Reynolds wants us at the station. Now. What would you do if the whole world was about to see your darkest secrets? Stay strong or run for cover? Let's talk about it. Hit, like, and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too. They're trying to delete everything, Marcus said into his secure phone as he drove toward the outskirts of town. Have the team capture all server data remotely before they can purge it. Already done, replied a female voice. We initiated the FISA warrant 10 minutes after your first call. Everything's being preserved. The digital trail is extensive. Marcus, years of communications. Marcus pulled into the small county morgue parking lot. And my father's case specifically? We've got text exchanges between Miller and Deacon from the past 3 months. They specifically targeted your father's street, called it demographic adjustment. Marcus's grip tightened on the steering wheel. The shooting? Premeditated. They discussed creating a pretext stop. Deacon texted, and I quote, Old man Wilson keeps filing complaints with the city. Time to teach him respect. Marcus closed his eyes briefly before exiting the vehicle. Keep digging. I want everything. Inside the morgue, Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from her desk, recognition flashing across her face. You must be Howard's son. Marcus nodded. I need to see him. Dr. Chen hesitated. I received calls from the department asking me to expedite paperwork citing natural causes. But when I examined your father, she led Marcus to a covered body. This wasn't a heart. Attack! She pulled back the sheet, revealing Howard Wilson's peaceful face and a small, precise bullet wound near his temple. Single shot. Close range. This was an execution, not self-defense, she said quietly. I was going to call the state medical examiner tomorrow. Thank you for your honesty, Marcus said, gently placing his hand on his father's. Can I have a moment? When she left, Marcus stood silently. A private goodbye between father and son. Across town, the police station had erupted into chaos. Reynolds barricaded himself in his office as officers milled about in confusion, phones ringing constantly. Captain, the mayor's on line 1, the desk sergeant called. And the FBI field, office from St. Louis, is on line 2. Officer Jenkins, the rookie who'd recognized Marcus earlier, knocked tentatively on Reynolds's door. Sir? There's something you should see. Reynolds yanked the door open. What now? Jenkins held up his phone. It's trending on social media. Someone leaked the department texts, all of them. Reynolds grabbed the phone, scrolling through post after post of screenshots, racist messages, coordinated targeting of minority neighborhoods, explicit discussions of fabricating evidence. "Who leaked this?" Reynolds demanded, face purpling with rage. "It wasn't leaked," Jenkins said quietly. "It was released by the Department of Justice. They're citing a pattern of civil rights violations." Reynolds collapsed into his chair. "This is impossible. No one could access these that quickly without—" He stopped cold, realization dawning. At that moment, Miller and Deacon burst into the station. "Captain, we need to talk right now." Reynolds looked up, defeat etched on his face. "It's too late." "What do you mean?" Deacon demanded. "He means," came a new voice from the doorway, "that you're under arrest." Two FBI agents, flanked by state police officers, stood in the entrance, badges displayed. "Captain Blake Reynolds, Officers James Miller and Paul Deacon," the lead agent announced. "You're under arrest for civil rights violations resulting in death, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and evidence tampering." As they read the Miranda rights, Reynolds stared out the window, half expecting to see Marcus Wilson watching. But there was no one there. No dramatic confrontation. Just the quiet, methodical machinery of justice finally working as it should. Miles away, Marcus stood at his father's graveside, phone in hand. "It's done," said the voice on the other end. "All three in custody. Federal charges." Marcus looked at the sunset painting, the sky in brilliant orange and purple hues. "Thank you, Madam Attorney General. What would you do if you had the power to bring down an entire corrupt system? Use it or walk away? Let's talk about it. Hit like and subscribe to the channel if this hit you too." "Marcus, the Pentagon is calling," said Colonel Stevens, approaching with a satellite phone. "They want you to stand down. Let the DOJ handle this from here." Marcus stood at the window of his father's home, watching as news vans began to gather outside the police station across town. Why? Politics. The optics. A Delta operator using military resources for a personal vendetta? They're concerned about blowback. Marcus didn't take the phone. He stared at it like it was a threat. This isn't a vendetta. This is justice. Stevens sighed heavily. The Secretary of Defense himself is asking. They'll make it an order if you force their hand. A long silence fell between the men before Marcus spoke. My father spent his entire life following rules in a system designed to break him. He filed complaints through proper channels. He attended city council meetings. He respected the institutions that never respected him. He turned to face his superior officer. And they killed him for it. I understand, Stevens said quietly. But there are larger considerations. Tell the secretary I'm on bereavement leave, Marcus interrupted. And my father deserves the truth. Stevens nodded slowly, a mixture of concern and respect in his eyes. They won't like it. I don't serve politics, Marcus said firmly. I serve justice, and right now, they're not the same thing. As Stevens walked away, Marcus overheard two neighbors talking outside. Did you hear? Wilson's boy brought down the whole department. The other replied simply, Good. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight of what he'd started. When he opened them again, they were clear, focused, unshakable. He knew this would cost him promotions, possibly his career, but he also knew the cost of silence, and he wasn't paying it anymore. Marcus activated the secure laptop he'd brought. From base, accessing a level of clearance few outside the intelligence community knew existed. With 3 keystrokes, he bypassed standard protocols and connected directly to the National Security Agency's PRISM database. This is Commander Wilson. Authorization code Echo Tango Delta 937. He spoke clearly into the biometric voice recognition system. I am invoking Directive 355 under National Security Protocol regarding domestic terrorism networks operating within law enforcement. Across the room, Jenny from the coffee shop and Pastor James watched in stunned silence, not comprehending what they were witnessing but understanding its significance. "Request approved," came the automated response. "Full access granted for 24-hour window." "What are you doing?" Pastor James finally asked. "Connecting dots," Marcus replied, fingers flying across the keyboard. "My father's murder wasn't isolated. It was part of a pattern connecting at least 6 departments across 3 states. These officers didn't just happen to be racist. They were recruited, organized." Jenny moved closer, peering at the screen. "Like a network?" "Exactly like a network," Marcus confirmed. "Far-right extremists have been infiltrating law enforcement for years. Reynolds and his officers were part of a larger group calling themselves the Sentinels. They communicate on encrypted channels, share tactics, and help each other cover up constitutional violations." Outside, more vehicles arrived, not media this time, but government SUVs with federal license plates. Men and women in suits emerged, moving with the purposeful efficiency of federal agents. Officer Miller, handcuffed in the back of a police transport, let out a bitter laugh as he watched the procession through the window. "You have no idea what you've started. We're everywhere." Marcus, unaware of Miller's words, but fully aware of their truth, continued his digital excavation. "This stops now," he murmured, initiating a final command sequence that would automatically distribute the network's communications to federal prosecutors in 12 jurisdictions simultaneously. Pastor James placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Howard would be proud." "Maybe," Marcus replied, closing the laptop. "But he'd rather be alive." A knock at the door revealed a woman in a crisp suit, badge already extended. "Commander Wilson, I'm Special Agent Ramirez, FBI Civil Rights Division. We need to talk." Marcus nodded, showing her in. "About my father?" "About much more than that," she replied gravely. "What you've uncovered goes beyond Pine Creek. We're talking about a multi-state conspiracy involving dozens of law enforcement agencies. The Attorney General is personally overseeing the investigation now." Outside, sirens began to rise in the distance, not frantic or chaotic, just steady, methodical, inevitable. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the back of a crowded federal courtroom as Reynolds, Miller, and Deacon were led in wearing orange jumpsuits and handcuffs. Gone was their swagger, their certainty, their power. They looked smaller somehow, diminished not just by circumstances, but by exposure. The U.S. Attorney stood before the judge, her voice carrying through the packed gallery. "Your Honor, the conspiracy uncovered in this case represents one of the most extensive infiltrations of extremist ideology into law enforcement this country has seen. 43 officers across 12 departments have been indicted. The defendants before you today not only murdered Howard Wilson in cold blood, but participated in a years-long campaign of terrorizing minority communities under color of law." Marcus remained still, his face expressionless as the proceedings continued. Dr. Chen sat 2 rows ahead. The medical examiner's report that she refused to falsify now part of the mountain of evidence. Jenny from the coffee shop nodded at him from across the aisle, while Pastor James sat directly behind the prosecution table, a silent reminder of the community's eyes on justice. When Reynolds was allowed to speak, he turned slightly, scanning the courtroom until he found Marcus. "You think this changes anything? There are thousands of us, in every department, every agency. This system was built by us, for us. The judge leaned forward. That's enough, Mr. Reynolds. The sentencing was swift and severe. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole for all three men. Not just for Howard Wilson's murder, but for 5 other killings now linked to their demographic adjustment campaign. As the defendants were led away, Reynolds locked eyes with Marcus one final time. Not in defiance now, but in defeated recognition that his world had irrevocably changed. Outside the courthouse, Marcus declined interviews from the gathered press. This wasn't about him. It never had been. Instead, he walked to where a memorial now stood in the park across from his father's house. A simple bench with a plaque reading, Howard Wilson, 1950-2022. He carried more than mail. He carried dignity. Marcus sat there for a long time as the autumn leaves fell around him. Finally, Special Agent Ramirez approached, sitting beside him. "It's not over," she said quietly. "The network is wounded, not eliminated. We need people like you. People who understand the threat and have the skills to fight it." Marcus looked at her. "I'm a soldier, not an agent." "Maybe it's time for something new," she replied, handing him a card. "When you're ready." Marcus slipped the card into his pocket and stood. "My father would say justice isn't what happens in a courtroom. It's what we build afterward." The camera panned across Howard Wilson's mail route, the same streets he'd walked for 27 years, houses where he'd delivered letters, parcels, and greetings, neighbors who'd known him, respected him, and now mourned him. This wasn't about one corrupt department or 3 rogue officers. This was about what happens when good people refuse to look away. When someone finally says, "Enough." Real justice doesn't arrive like a thunderbolt. It builds slowly, through evidence, through courage, through systems finally working as they should. Like Marcus Wilson, we don't need special forces training to stand against corruption. We just need to recognize that evil thrives not just through violence, but through our silence. Because justice doesn't begin with governments or courts. It begins in neighborhoods, in conversations, in demands for accountability. It begins with us.